An American colonel saved a foreign army because his own command rejected him. Isaac Newton Lewis drafted the blueprints in 1911. The specs were impossible by standard logic. 28 pounds, a top-mounted pan magazine holding 47 rounds. While other guns required a team, the Lewis gun required only one operator. But the United States Ordnance Department refused to look. General William Crozier blocked the adoption. A personal grudge prioritized bureaucracy over ballistics. He buried the positive test results deep in the archives. Lewis did not argue. He resigned his commission. He packed 4 prototypes into his luggage and sailed for Europe in 1913. The Belgian army asked no questions. When the German advance hit Namur in 1914, the infantry walked into a wall of lead. They heard a sound they had never encountered, a dry, mechanical cracking. Not a thump, but a sharp, rapid vibration. The Germans called it the Belgian Rattlesnake. The weapon proved itself in the first week of combat. The Birmingham Small Arms Company immediately signed the papers for the production license. The Birmingham contract was a desperate move. Why was the 28-pound Lewis suddenly critical? Because the standard issue Vickers weighed 90 pounds and stuck in the rear. In 1914, the Vickers was the gold standard of reliability, but it was a static beast. To move a single unit, the Army required a 6-man crew. 90 pounds is 40 kilograms. Try sprinting through deep mud with that weight while under fire. It is physically impossible. The heavy steel tripod and the water-filled cooling jacket acted like a lead anchor. They pinned the gun crews to the trench floor while the rest of the section went over the top. This created a fatal gap. The infantry charged into no man's land without automatic support. The machine gunners lagged behind, sometimes for hours, dragging their equipment through the craters. The enemy exploited this mechanical delay. German defenders knew that in the first phase of an attack, they would see only rifles in their crosshairs. Command accepted the reality of the deficit. In October 1915, the Lewis gun officially entered standard service. The initial rollout was a trickle, 4 guns per battalion, 4 automatic weapons to cover 1,000 men. It was a statistical error in the face of German machine gun nests. But the Birmingham Small Arms Company, BSA, converted raw steel into volume. The factory lines spun up. This was no longer about craftsmanship. It was about industrial stamping. The saturation of the front line changed physics. A single battalion's firepower surged from 4 tubes to 46 in under 2 years. An 11-fold increase in lead output. The supply chain flooded the trenches. By the time the armistice was signed, BSA alone had delivered 145,000 units. To wield this industrial avalanche, the Army engineered a rigid human chassis. A standard Lewis team was 6 men, 1 mechanism. Number 1 hauled the weapon, 28 pounds of steel, a revolver on his hip for the bitter end. Number 2 shadowed him, no rifle, just a heavy bag of springs, bolts, and oil. His sole purpose was mechanical. Keep the gun cycling while the world burned around them. Behind them marched 4 mules in human shape. They carried full infantry kits. They carried Lee Enfield rifles. But their real burden was the feed, 8 loaded drums apiece. This wasn't a squad, it was an organism. Every man knew how to strip the bolt. Every man could clear a jam in seconds. Because the Army did the math. They knew number 1 would die. Number 2 had to be ready to step over the body and pull the trigger immediately. The tactical output was staggering. A single 6-man cell generated the suppression volume of 50 riflemen. But unlike the static Vickers, this firepower moved. It popped up from shell craters, it vanished. It reappeared on the flank. A lethal game of whack-a-mole. The enemy adapted fast. German officers issued a standing order. Scan the line for the distinctive thick cooling shroud and the flat disc magazine. Ignore the riflemen. Kill the machine gunner first. The moment the Lewis went silent, the platoon lost nearly all its offensive power. The gunner became the most hunted man on the battlefield. The British High Command prepared to unleash this structure at the Battle of the Somme. Mass production solved the shortage of steel. But on July 1, 1916, the Somme sent the bill in flesh. 15 million rounds, That is what British Lewis guns fired every 24 hours during the offensive. The barrels glowed red in the twilight. But statistics blur the reality. To see the true cost of maintenance, look at one specific glass case in the Australian War Memorial. The story is not in the placard. It is written in the deep scratches on the cooling jacket. Flashback to the mud. The metallic clank of the bolts cycling provides the only rhythm. It drowns out the screams of the wounded. This specific weapon belonged to the 27th Battalion of the Australian Imperial Force. It entered the line in March 1916. It spit out 150,000 rounds. It survived 2.5 years of constant combat until a shell fragment finally smashed it at Grandcourt. The machine was durable. The operators were not. 60 different soldiers manned this single weapon. That is the head count of 2 full infantry platoons. One gun survived 60 owners. The logic of the trenches turned the crew into a disposable component. As soon as a gunner fell, the number 2 stepped over the body and took the grip. The cycle repeated until the sector was clear or the crew was gone. The final audit of that one steel tube is absolute. Of the 60 men who touched it, 32 were wounded. 21 were killed in action. But statistics are just ink on paper. On the ground, that attrition had a face. Thomas Cook, a 35-year-old carpenter with a wife and 3 children. July 1916, the ruins of Pozières. Cook operated a Lewis gun for the 8th Battalion. The logic of the front was simple. The machine gun anchored the line. If the gun stopped, the sector collapsed. German fire stripped his crew away. Loaders died. Spotters fell. Soon, Cook was the only man left standing. He did not retreat. He reloaded his own drums. He cleared his own jams. In the dark, the muzzle flash was a beacon. It revealed his position to every sniper in the trench opposite. A perfect target. Cook traded his life for suppression fire. When relief units finally broke through, they found him dead beside the receiver. The gun was empty, but the line was intact. Heroism wasn't a choice, it was a tactical requirement. Lance Sergeant John Moy faced the same calculus a year later. Belgium, north of Broombeek, September 1917. Moy commanded 15 men in an advanced post. The Germans cut them off completely. 96 hours, 4 days without water. Food ran out. The enemy closed the ring, expecting surrender. Moy answered with 47 rounds per minute. He held the perimeter until the 5th day. 1 gun against a full encirclement. The math was impossible. Moy realized the defensive phase was over. He switched to offense. He cleared the immediate front with grenades. Then he fixed bayonets. With the Lewis gun empty, he led the survivors in a charge straight through the German line. While the trenches turned into graveyards, the Lewis gun found a new life in the sky. But the adaptation started years before the first shot of the war. 1912. Captain Charles Chandler took the weapon aboard a Wright Model B. He identified the problem immediately: weight. The heavy aluminum cooling shroud was vital for ground defense, but useless at 2,000 feet. The slipstream cooled the steel, so engineers stripped the casing. The gun's weight dropped to 20 pounds. This was the critical threshold. It allowed fragile wooden airframes to carry automatic fire without losing lift. By 1917, this modification defined air combat. Captain Billy Bishop mounted a stripped Lewis on his scout plane. He launched a solo raid on a German aerodrome and returned with a Victoria Cross. He didn't just use standard ball ammunition, he loaded incendiary rounds. The target was the highly flammable hydrogen inside German Zeppelins. In the sky, the Lewis became a hunter. On the ground, it stopped being a crutch. It became the engine of the assault. By 1917, the British Army didn't just use the gun, they rebuilt their entire doctrine around it. The strategy was mechanical and ruthless. The Lewis suppressed the trench, and the riflemen moved in the vacuum it created. The gun didn't support the infantry. The gun was the infantry. Factories churned out 6 Lewis guns in the time it took to build a single heavy Vickers. The front line flooded with automatic fire. By the 100 Days Offensive, a single battalion carried 36 guns. This created a density of fire the German Empire had no answer for. What was the weapon's greatest asset in 1918? Invulnerability. Private Arthur Bullock noted it in his training logs. The gun was tough as nails. It simply didn't stop. On April 13th, Bullock and his crew set up on the road to Robeck. A German column advanced. Bullock opened fire. The barrel grew hot enough to blister skin. The crew rotated, keeping the trigger down, turning the road into a kill zone. One single gun inflicted 400 casualties. How long does a machine gun crew last under fire? One shell, 3 seconds, 3 dead. But this mechanical dominance demanded a biological price. The Lewis gun was a heavy, hungry beast, and it fed on the men who served it. Take Private Charles Tongini of the 48th Battalion. During a German assault, shrapnel took both his legs. Another hit crushed his arm. Technically, the operator was destroyed, but Tongini kept the weapon cycling. He held the line until his body physically shut down. He was the exception. Usually, the failure happened behind the gun. A Lewis team is not a squad. It is a single biomechanical organism. The gunner is the head. The carriers are the bloodstream. Standard protocol called for 5 to 7 men. By 1917, attrition often stripped this down to 2. One surviving account dissects the anatomy of this failure. The team was moving through open ground. The gunner walked ahead. The carriers followed. Then the rhythm broke. A high explosive shell landed 5 yards back. The earth erupted. The gunner turned around to call for ammo. He saw nothing. A smoking crater where the logistics used to be. Numbers 3, 4, and 5. Men converted into a delivery system for. 303 rounds were gone instantly. The connection between the shooter and the ammunition was severed. 4 months they had served together. In the compressed time of the trenches, 4 months was a lifetime. They were brothers. They were essential components. Now, the gunner stood alone at the barrel. The pans never arrived. While the human crews were dying in the mud, the hardware was being crated for the next war. 59,000 scrapped units returned to the roster in a single month. The catalyst was Dunkirk. Summer 1940. The British Army evacuated the men but abandoned the steel. 80% of the Empire's automatic weapons remained rusting on the French beaches. Britain faced invasion with empty hands. Logistics officers cracked open the storage depots. They pulled out the retired Lewis guns. Mechanics fitted aircraft models with crude wooden stocks. But they ignored the cooling jackets. The guns cycled perfectly without the heavy aluminum shrouds. The thermodynamics held up. For the veterans of the Great War, this was a cruel joke. They had dragged that extra weight through 4 years of hell for absolutely nothing. The mechanism fought on every front. In the Pacific, the Japanese Navy fired authorized copies known as the Type 92 against the Allies. The design was ubiquitous. Peter White's battalion fired the old guns from Universal Carriers until the very last days of 1945. Even when the last 59,000 original hulls went to the smelters, the Colonel's engineering logic remained alive. It didn't just survive, it cloned itself. Overlay the blueprints of the 20th century. The characteristic profile of the gas piston is the marker. German engineers pinched the gas assembly and bolt design for the FG-42 paratrooper rifle. They didn't reinvent the cycle, they copied it. The United States did the same. That specific rotating bolt design became the beating heart of the M60 machine gun. From the jungles of Vietnam to the conflicts of the 2000s. Different external shells, same internal organs. The physics of airflow proved even more resilient. In modern Russia, the PKP Pecheneg still utilizes a forced air cooling system to pull heat from the barrel. It allows the gun to dump 600 rounds without warping the steel. A direct, breathing heritage of the Lewis design. The originals lingered too. Long after Britain officially retired the weapon in 1946, they surfaced in the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. They appeared in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. They were spotted in the trenches of Croatia as late as the 1990s. Across a century of warfare, total production numbers reached 152,000 units.